Welcome back to Resistance Chicks. We are your hosts, Leah and Michelle. Today is the 13th of July, 2017. So what do we have next?
Okay, so this article was mind-blowing to me, and I really appreciated the author. Her name is Cheryl Bernard, and she actually has first-hand knowledge of the refugee crisis, so she really knows what she's talking about. And she says, I've worked with refugees for decades. Europe's Afghan crime wave is mind-blowing. And so this whole article is about the Afghanistan young men who are coming into Europe and how they are committing more heinous crimes, and basically rape crimes, sex crimes against Europeans, and in particular Austria.
But you can't talk about it because then you're racially profiling.
Exactly, but she lays out the reasons why this is happening, and I'm kind of going to give the punchline right in the beginning. When you recognize that the United States and the UN has basically trained these children up.
Right.
Okay, we have schooled them. We have given them schooling on how to react between the genders and things like that. Well, they're pretty angry about it. And you go into a person's culture and you take away everything that is theirs, right? And they're waging their own jihad, and it's this sexual perverse jihad, and they don't even care because it's mind-boggling. They're trying to rape women on trains in the middle of parks. It's like, you know, you're going to get caught. It's kind of like a battle to them, and it's like a war. So in 2014, when waves of refugees began flooding into Western Europe, citizens and officials alike responded with generosity and openness. Exhausted refugees spilled out of trains and buses to be met by crowds bearing gifts of clothing and food and holding up place cards that read, "Welcome, refugees." This was a honeymoon that could not last. Some of the upcoming difficulties had been anticipated, that the newcomers did not speak the local languages, might be traumatized, blah, 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 you know, and they just kind of glossed over those. But there are developments that they didn't actually take into account.
And it says that Angela Merkel promised that these things were all manageable.
Right. The large and growing incidents of sexual assaults committed by refugees against local women. These were not of the cultural misunderstandings, date rape sort, but were vicious, they don't make sense, right?
When you see I think some of the examples you're going to get to was like a woman sitting in a park or something like that, playing with children,
right?
And then you approach that person who's having a joyous time and do this crime. It's not the same thing.
The idea is to attack Western happy women, and to commit an act of violence. So first, obviously, we all know the incidences were hushed up. You're not allowed to talk about where people are from, what country of origin they're from.
Right. We learned that with Sweden, that police officer that we covered a couple of months ago.
But as the incidents increased, people had to take note to what was going on and where these people were coming from. They couldn't be swept under the carpet. The official acknowledgement and public reporting, a weird and puzzling footnote emerged. Most of the assaults were being committed by refugees, and one particular nationality, by Afghans. Actually, Afghans should not have even been part of the refugee tide, at least not in significant numbers. It was Assyrians who were expected. Afghanistan, a place of lingering and chronic conflict, who we all should pretty much admit that we did it. Our countries, went in destabilized
we did that. Yeah, we did that.
Is no longer on the official refugee roster because it's just, it's when you've been there for 16 years, it's just kind of no big deal. That's reserved for acute political and military emergencies. Still, European authorities and the public were sympathetic and could understand why Afghans would want to leave the country. So they okay, bring them all in. And the interesting thing is this author knows more middle class, older Afghans who aren't like this. So to paint all Afghans with this broad brush,
right,
she says is not helpful.
Well, you hit the nail on the head when you were saying that we went in there literally 16 years ago,
right?
And it's a result of what we have done there that has created this sort of chaos.
So what she's saying is that if you blame it on the misogynistic Islamic mentality, which we all want to blame it on, and that is part of it, why is it that some of the other countries that have that same Islamic attitude, those aren't perpetuating the same crimes to the same extent?
Right.
This is not an article that has been fun for this author to write. She has worked in issues related to refugees for much of her professional life. She, from the Pakistani camps during the Soviet occupation in Afghanistan to Yemen, Sudan, Thailand, Ethiopia, Lebanon, Bosnia, Nicaragua. I just wanted to give you an idea of where this author is coming from. Right. She knows what she's talking about. But nowhere had she encountered a phenomenon like this one. Wow. She said, I had seen refugees trapped in circumstances that made them vulnerable to rape by camp guards and soldiers, but for the refugees to become the perpetrators of this crime in the place that had given them asylum, that was something new.
Yeah.
Further, her experience, her personal and professional life, she's, like I said, she knows Afghan and Afghan American friends, and there's nothing collectively psychopathic about them. She knows entrepreneurs, IT experts, sales ladies, amazing. She knows a lot of people, but she goes on to say, a few weeks ago, the Austrian city of Tulln declared a full stop on any further refugee admissions, as the mayor made clear that decision was aimed at Afghans, but for legal and administrative reasons, it could only be promulgated in a global way. That had not been the city's intentions. To the contrary, it had just completed the construction of an expensive brand new facility for incoming asylum seekers, which would now, the mayor declared, be given over to another purpose. His exact words, "We've had it."
We've had it. That's pretty strong.
The tipping point after a series of disturbing incidences, all emanating from Afghans, was the brutal gang rape of a 15-year-old girl, snatched from the street on her way home, dragged away, and serially abused by Afghan refugees. And that was just one in a string of outrage-inducing occurrences, all of them going to the account of Afghans. A while before, in Vienna, a young female Turkish exchange student had been pursued into the public restroom by 3 Afghan refugees. They jammed the door shut and proceeded to savagely attack her, grabbing her by the neck. They struck her head repeatedly against a porcelain toilet bowl to knock her out. When that failed to break her desperate resistance, they took turns holding her down and raping her. The young woman required a hospital stay, after which, too traumatized to resume her studies, she fled to Turkey, where she continued to be depressed. There are just so many crazy incidences, and the only correlation became so dramatic that it was itself newsworthy, and about this whole thing was the Afghans. At that point, it became clear the authorities had known about, and for political reasons had deliberately covered up, large-scale incidences of sexual assaults by the migrants. For example, a gang of 50 Afghans who terrorized women in the neighborhood of Linz train station had been brushed off by a government official with the remark that this was an unfortunate consequence of bad weather. And that once summer came, the young men would disperse into public parks and no longer move in such a large, menacing pack.
Really?
The public was not amused. She says, I could write the same report about Sweden and Germany and, other countries in Europe. But she's focusing on examples from Austria because that's the country that she knows best, where she's from. So she wants to take a look at the Australian press.
Austrian.
Yeah, Austrian press. From the Österreich, the daily newspaper distributed for free on public transit and thus read basically by almost everyone. The front page. Afghan 18 attacks young woman at Danube Festival. Once again, there has been an attempted rape by an Afghan. A 21-year-old Slavic tourist was mobbed and groped by a group of men. She managed to get away but was pursued by one of them. An Afghan asylum seeker who caught her and dragged her into the bushes. Nearby plainclothes policemen noticed the struggle and intervened to prevent the rape at the last moment. Page 10, same paper, right? A 25-year-old Afghan attempted to rape a young woman who was sitting in the sun in the park. 4 courageous passerbys dragged the man off the victim and held him until the police arrived. Page 12.
Good for them.
We're still on the same paper. 2 Afghans have been sentenced for attempting to rape a woman on the train in Garans. The men who live in an asylum seeker's residence first insulted the young woman with obscene verbal remarks before attacking her. When she screamed for help, passengers from other parts of the train rushed for her aid. Let's leave aside the how reprehensible this conduct is and focus instead on logic. Can these men possibly expect that their attempts will be successful? Do they actually think that they can rape people in the middle of the day? She's like, this does not make any sense. Why are they doing this? Is it just because, as some people say, where they come from, women are mostly covered, and that just leads them into this crazy hormonal whatever?
No.
She says that what is going on here? Why the Afghans? According to Austrian police statistics, Syrian refugees cause fewer than 10% of sexual assault cases. Afghans, whose numbers are comparable, are responsible for stunning half of all the cases. And so if you type into Google the words Afghan, and I'm not exactly sure what this word is in Australian, but I'm pretty sure it has to do with rape or sexual assault. It's a cornucopia of appalling incidences unfolds before you. The mentally retarded woman in Linz, kidnapped, dragged to an Afghan refugee's apartment, and raped until she was finally able to escape into his bathroom, lock herself in, and as he battered at the door, she cranked open the window and screamed for help. This is just one of many. These are just crazy. She goes, others are merely baffling. Public swimming pools are confronted with epidemics of young Afghan men. We've heard about this, who think that it's a good idea to expose themselves in the pool and blah, 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 before they're tackled by lifeguards. It's, you know, she goes on to try to, you know, okay, maybe they think that they're at a nudist beach, but seriously.
No.
No. Exactly. This is unthinkable. Come on. Within hours of their arrival, the Afghan refugee grapevine educates newcomers on the ins and outs of navigating the country. So one of the things they're taught, though, is to get drunk, because in European courts, if say that you're incapacitated or you weren't thinking straight, you can get off. But unfortunately, sometimes they don't realize that they need to drink more than 2 beers, so they're obviously just not going to get off right away.
Right.
So some people say it's a clash of cultures, obviously, but you know, we know that that can't be the fact. We know that that is totally not true. So there has to be something that we're all missing here.
Stop.
Sunny. So in one recent case that raised a huge public outcry, a woman was out for a walk in a park on an elevation above Danube. With her, she had her 2 children, a toddler plus her infant, in a baby carriage. Out of the blue, an Afghan refugee leapt on her, threw her down, bit her, strangled her, and attempted to rape her.
Oh my gosh.
In the struggle,
No
the
biting.
baby carriage went careening towards the embankment, and the infant almost plunged into the river below. I'm not even kidding you.
No biting.
With her second child looking on aghast, the woman valiantly fought her off her assailant, ripping the hood off his jacket, which she was later able to identify him. In another incident, 2 young women were on a midday stroll in the pedestrian zone of a small Austrian town, pushing their babies in baby carriages, proms, before them, when they were abruptly attacked by several Afghan refugees who lunged at them and ripped off their clothing before they were apprehended, before they could do further damage. It's clear that such events antagonize the general public. It's also clear that we can dismiss the whole they were drunk, obviously.
Yeah.
So here is the most disturbing theory, Sydney. The one that her Afghan friend, a court translator, puts forward. On the basis of his hundreds of interactions with these young men in his professional capacity over the past several years, he believes to have discovered that they are motivated by a deep and abiding contempt for Western civilization.
Absolutely.
To them, Europeans are the enemy and their women are legitimate spoils, as are all the other things one can take from them. Housing, money, passports. And this is another disturbing trend, because when you think about the welfare system, Sydney's very upset about this. When you think about the welfare system that they are milking, they throw away their papers on purpose. We all know this, so that like gray-haired men are 17. Whole families throw away their papers. She tells a story of a whole family who threw away their papers and said that the dad was an uncle. They get set up as she's a widow, right, with 2 kids. She lies about their ages so that their children longer, right? And some of these places, they don't have birthdays. In Afghanistan, they didn't have birthdays, so they make them up. She read one where the birthdays are impossible. June 1st, June 2nd, June 3rd. Seriously? So anyways, so you don't need to assimilate or work hard or try to build a decent life for yourself in Europe. It's like you get everything that you need, right? So it's not just the sex crimes, her friend notes. Those may agitate public sentiment the most, but the deliberate, insidious abuse of the welfare system is just as consequential. Afghan refugees, he says, have a particular proclivity to play the system, to lie about their age, to lie about their circumstances, to pretend to be younger, to pretend to be handicapped, to pretend that a car accident was a wound for being tortured. okay, to belong to an ethnic minority, and then the judge can tell that they're not part of that ethnic minority. So she's encountered 30-year-olds with family in Austria who are passing themselves off as unaccompanied minors. She's met people misrepresenting an old traffic injury. I told you about that. So Western legal systems are meticulous and procedural. So basically, you can just keep appealing, right? So you're denied asylum, well, you can appeal. You're denied your age, well, you can appeal. And then DNA, or not DNA, but age tests are expensive. But this author gives some answers at the end, and she does believe age tests should be part of it. You know, more screening. But I'm going to try to link to this article. But the essence of it, she thinks, she gets to the essence of it. She goes, why is this happening? What is the common denominator? A girl in a park enjoying the sunshine, two friends taking their babies for a walk, a mother enjoying a summer stroll with her two children, a contented old lady. Who rapes an old lady? She's a contented old lady out with her pet. Attractive, accomplished, happy, normal people. That is an unbearable sight to and here she must agree with President Trump, losers. That is what he proposed we should call terrorists, and he is right. These young men, even minus a suicide vest, are losers, which has inspired them to become social terrorists. The young Afghan attackers are saying yes, that they have no impulse control, that their hormones are raging, and that they hate themselves and the world, but most especially, they will not tolerate women who are happy, confident, and feeling safe in public spaces. They are saying that they have no intention of respecting the law, custom, public opinion, local values, or common decency, all of which they hate so much that they are ready to put their own lives, their constructive futures, because you obviously know that they're doing this, they know they're going to get caught, and their freedom on the line for the satisfaction of inflicting damage. They're so
damage.
Exactly. So the established middle-class dysphoria Afghans are understandably upset and embarrassed to see their nationality thus disgraced by these uncouth newcomers, and yet they're part of the problem. Many of their actions and reactions, however natural or unintended, amount to complicity. They cover up, they make excuses for, advise on the best way to wriggle out of the consequences, and
that's
even
what family does, though.
Deception.
That's your family and friends in an abusive situation like that. That's what happens.
Illegal acts and disgraceful manners of friends, relatives, and random unknown fellow Afghans. The reasons for this are many layered. There is a perceived obligation to be loyal, and I told you about the birthdays. They're not just young and they're not just confused, but she goes on in the rest of this article. She talks about, you know, these young men attended the schools that we set up. Since 2001, we spent billions on an Afghan school system that we like to cite as one of our greatest accomplishments. This is what they're churning out, right? Just millions and millions of dollars for rule of law programs to convey notions of female equality and human value in regard for law and order. Funded radio programs and entire TV stations devoted to the goal. Obviously, they will not be programmed. It's anti-programming, and in my opinion, this author's not sure if she goes this far. It's on purpose.
It's absolutely on purpose. They knew that this would happen. They want it to happen, and that's why they have opened the floodgates to let these people into European countries, and why they're wanting to let the doors open in the United States.
2001, before 9/11, before we went in and took over and messed these people all up, Afghans weren't going to Europe raping people.
No, they weren't, huh?
So you have to have, like, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Cause and effect.
And we see cause and effect. You have to put the blame on where blame is due, right?
You know what I hate about algebra is that you have to fill in a lot of blanks, but what you often get is the answer, and then you have to fill in the how did you get to that answer. The answer is this was not happening and it's happening now, which makes it so you can go back and see what was the change.
Okay, so here's the like the apex, right? Brings her to the final theory being invented in Austria. That these destructive, crazed young men are being intentionally infiltrated into Western Europe to wreak havoc, to take away the freedom and security of women, change patterns of behavior, deepen the rifts between liberals who continue to defend and find excuses, and the right wing that calls for harsh measures and violent responses, to inflict high costs and aggravation on courts and judicial systems, and generally make a mess of things. For the record, she's not convinced that there is a deliberate plan behind this, but she does agree that the angry, unstable men are susceptible to destructive past. Those pasts can lead to ideological extremism, terrorism, and things like that. So what to do, she gives answers. Obviously, anyone convicted of a felony of any kind of sexual crime should be immediately deported. That consequence should be made known to new arrivals. Obviously, that should be obvious. And then she goes in to talk about the different welfare and things like that. Now, I am convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the conflicts, the 7 countries in 5 years, are meant to destabilize Europe and Western Christian wholesome values. Okay? And they are playing with people's minds, both on the right and especially on the left. Especially the people on the left are more likely to be manipulated, because the people on the right are more likely to be, you know, gun-toting, which is interesting because I think that the media portrays the people on the right as the more easily manipulated. But truthfully, the people on the left are, a lot of them are kind, and you can take this as a compliment. They want to love people. They want to care about people. So when you talk about social programs and helping refugees, they want to jump right in. So we're not hating on leftists or liberals whatsoever. You guys are great people. You love people. But you have to wake up to the fact that you're being manipulated.
Right.
Okay? And you keep into allowing criminal behavior. One of the things that the leftists pride themselves on is helping the downtrodden, helping the abused. Well, what happens when your downtrodden and abused actually become the abusers? Then you have a really sticky mess, and you have to use wisdom, and you have to be able to call things as they are, right? And so I am convinced that George Soros and his ilk and the Clintonites have wanted to destabilize Christianity at its root, at its core, and to shake the whole continent of Europe. Right? To shake away Christianity and to flood it with Muslims, and not just Muslims, but they have taken away anything that would be good in Islam. Any of the, and not so much good in Islam, but good in the culture of the people. There is some good, obviously, in all cultures, and there's good in the cultures in the Middle East. But they shook away the good, and they raised up the bad, and funded this extreme Islamic ideology, which is the most misogynistic, women-hating government in all of history, pretty much, that I can think of. Women-hating, misogynistic government is Islam.
Yes.
One woman from
For those of you that don't know, Islam is a political ideology.
Right. So one woman from Iran says that on birth certificates is a man and a boy, but women, no women, because women don't even exist. She says you can on her birth certificate.
Right.
And so the point is that this is awful, and we need to call it like it is, and we need to deal with the problem that has been created while also identifying the problem and how it was created.
Exactly. So I didn't really have anything else to add to this, so we're going to sign off here for Resistance Chicks, where it's not a conspiracy theory. If it's the truth, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Mass Faith 3 and Resistance Chicks. Ring the bell for notifications. Find us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. We love you. God loves you. God bless.
Yay!
I was called all alone.